Good morning and welcome to Bread and Butter on YouTube. My name is Lainey and today I'm going to be filming episode 2 of my Perfect Loaf series, which is based off of this book, The Perfect Loaf by Maurizio Leo. I'm so excited because episode 2 is going to involve baking my first loaf out of this book. If you have not watched episode 1 yet, that is all about sourdough starter. I go through his process for creating that starter. I will just say it turned out wonderfully. It's a 7-day process, so it does take a little bit of time, but within those 7 days, I learned so much about starter and came out with a beautiful one myself. The point of the Perfect Loaf series, just a challenge for myself personally to grow in my skills of sourdough and bread baking, which is something I really love, but feel like there's so much more I could learn. The loaf that I'm going to be baking today is called the 50/50 loaf. Maurizio Leo actually has a blog called The Perfect Loaf, and if you're interested in following along with me today, you can actually find that recipe on his blog, which I will link below in the description so we can bake some bread together. I'm ready to have some fresh baked bread, so let's get started. For this recipe, we're going to need an all-purpose flour or a white flour, a whole wheat flour, and a high protein or bread flour. We'll also be needing water, and then of course the star of the show, a ripe sourdough starter. If you don't have a kitchen scale, I highly recommend getting one because for this recipe it only uses grams, so this is something that is really necessary in making any of the recipes from Maurizio's book. The first thing that we're gonna do is make the levain. That is a mixture of starter, water, and flour that is going to be ripened and then put in the main dough later on. So for the levain, it calls for 48 grams of water at room temperature, which is 74 to 76 degrees. So I went ahead and made sure this water is in between that temperature range. 48 grams of ripe sourdough starter, 24 grams of white flour, and then 24 grams of whole wheat flour. The ratio of flour liquid to starter is 1 to 1 to 1 because you're using 48 grams of flour total, 48 grams of water total, and 48 grams of starter total. I'm gonna mix it with this tool if you can see it, but you can really use anything. If you have a whisk, use that. If you have a fork, use that. If you have a spatula, use that. You could even use your hands, I suppose, if you want. Why not? All right, now that I've mixed this, I'm just gonna cover it with a damp kitchen towel and then set it in a warm place for 3 hours. When this is ready to be used in our main dough, after the 3 hours is up, it should look aerated, soft, and show signs of ripeness, so it should have a good sour smell. It says to keep your levain in a warm space that's around room temperature, so around 76 degrees. So I'm gonna keep it in my oven with the light on. The next thing that we're supposed to do is make the Autolyse. I remember learning about Autolyse briefly during culinary school, not a lot, but I believe it is the dough that's mixed before any leavening agents are added, so before the starter is added. One thing that he recommends doing for the Autolyse, which is something I really am unfamiliar with, is calculating dough temperature, desired dough temperature, and therefore needing to calculate what temperature the water needs to be in order to mix the dough. So there's going to be some math involved, which I'm a little bit nervous for. Maybe it won't be as bad as it seems, but I'm not always the quickest to understand math. If you're going to be calculating the dough temperature, you're going to need a thermometer. This is the one I use, and I can link this below in the description. I will link everything I used today. Basically, for the Autolyse, you're supposed to mix it an hour before your levain is ready. So the levain has been in a warm spot ripening for about 2 hours now, and so it needs a total of 3 hours. So I'm going to go ahead and make the Autolyse so that can be resting for that final 3rd hour. Anyways, for the Autolyse, the measurements are going to be 453 grams of whole wheat flour, 215 grams of white flour, 238 grams of high protein white flour, and then 638 grams of water. Like I said earlier, you can find all of this on his blog. Time for the fun part, the water and calculating the water temperature. The desired dough temperature is 78 degrees. So that's our goal when we add the water to it, that the water will make the dough 78 degrees. So it says, about 1 hour before the levain is ready, warm or cool the Autolyse water. See page 138 on how to calculate. So the temperature of the mixed dough meets the desired dough temperature for this recipe. Okay, I can do this. Got some water. So I need to go to page 138. I'm probably gonna need way more water than that. It says I need 638 grams. Let's just forget this. Okay, I need to go to page 138 to calculate my water temperature. 138. Mixing water temp equals desired dough temp times 4 minus the sum of the flour temp, levain temp, ambient temp, and friction factor. Let's look at an example. Yeah, I need an example. So I'm gonna need a piece of paper because there's no way I can do this in my head. So this is the formula. Okay, our mixing water temp. I'm gonna abbreviate that as MWT. MWT equals our desired dough temperature times 4. So our desired dough temperature is 78 degrees Fahrenheit. That times 4, okay? So that I'm gonna put in brackets because that needs to be done separately to the rest of the equation. Once we figure that out, we're gonna subtract the sum of the flour temperature, levain temperature, ambient temperature, and friction factor from the 78 times 4, the desired dough temp times 4. So let's write this out. Okay, this is my levain. Gonna do the temperature of it. Okay, that's pretty warm. My levain is at 81. Mixing water temperature equals 78 times 4. Do that first, and then minus the sum of these numbers. This is the dough temperature. This is the levain temperature. This is the ambient temperature. This is the friction temperature, friction factor. So I'm going to go ahead and calculate that, and then this will give us a number. This will give us a number, and then we'll have our mixing water temperature. That's the next part of the equation. 312 minus 225. 312 minus 225 is going to equal our desired water temp, which is 87 degrees Fahrenheit. Gonna go ahead, get my water ready, and make sure it is 87 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so as you can see, I got the water temperature to 88 degrees. I know that my calculation says 87, but I believe 88 is close enough. All right, 638 grams of water. It says use wet hands to mix the dough, so that's what I'm gonna do until no dry spots remain. And I'm just gonna use my bowl scraper to make sure all of it is combined and scraped off the edges. Okay, I would say that looks really nice and good to go. I'm gonna cover this with this damp towel and just place this in the oven with the light on with my levain for the next hour. It has been 3 hours since mixing the levain now, and I just checked on it. It has some bubbles on the surface and is looking aerated, but I think it could go a little bit longer. So the book says that if it doesn't seem quite ripe enough, to let it sit another 30 minutes. So that's what I'm gonna do. I need to take the temperature of the dough, the Autolyse that we did earlier. All right, it says it's at 79 degrees Fahrenheit, which is almost perfect. The desired dough temperature is 78 degrees. The next step in this process is mixing the final dough. All right, I'm gonna just trust that my skill can do it. So it says add half of the water to begin with, and then the salt, and the Levain. Half the water would be 47. Half the water would be 47.5 grams, so that's what I'm gonna add. Now I'm gonna add my salt, sprinkle that on top, and then my Levain, all of my Levain. So my hands are wet, and I'm just gonna go in and kind of, I guess, just pinch the dough. Big pinch motion. This is actually something I did learn in culinary school, so I'm gonna keep doing it. It seems to work pretty well, at least for me. This makes a lovely sound. So I'm just trying to mix the dough until it comes together and the water has been absorbed. I don't really think that I need to add any more water. It feels pretty good to me. So now, according to the book, I am supposed to move on to the next phase, which is strengthening the dough. It says, with wet hands, use the slap and fold method, see page 83, for about 5 minutes to strengthen the dough. So I need to go see page 83 because I'm not super familiar with this method. The slap and fold technique, aka the French fold. Okay, it says use wet hands, so I'm gonna use wet hands. Scrape this onto the counter. I think that's how you do it. Let me make sure. Basically, it says the goal is to get the dough to look smooth and together. And my dough already looks smooth. That did not take very long. It says it should take 5 minutes. Maybe I didn't add quite enough water. Because I'm just slapping it and then folding it. Slap, fold, slap, fold. That looks, I think that's done. I don't think it needs 5 minutes. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I did not add as much water as I should have added. I don't know. I'm totally missing this dough. So what I'm doing is I'm picking it up from this side, turning it, slapping it, folding it, picking it up from this side, turning it, slapping it, folding it. It looks really good and smooth to me. So I'm gonna put it in my bowl. And then keep it there. We're gonna cover it and let it ferment. The bulk fermentation process takes a total of about 3 hours and 30 minutes. And during that period, we're gonna do 5 sets of folds every 30 minutes. And after you do the 5 folds every 30 minutes, you should have like about an hour of bulk fermentation time left over. I'm gonna go ahead and put this back in my oven with the light on to keep it warm. It is time for the first set of stretch and folds. So I'm just gonna wet my hands and start with the side farthest away from me. Scoop my hands under, pull the dough up and over itself. Rotate the bowl 180 degrees. Same thing with the side farthest from you. Pull up on the dough and fold it over itself. Now I'm gonna do a quarter turn. Stretch and fold the side farthest from me. Fold the dough over itself. And then another 180 degree turn. Stretch and fold the dough over itself. And that's it. Cover it, put it back in the oven with the light on for another 30 minutes. One thing I also like to do, just to help me keep track of how many folds I've done, is just have a little notepad and do a tally of how many folds. So I've done 1 fold, so I'll do 1 tally, and that will help me keep track. He also recommends in the book writing down the start time of bulk fermentation. So for me, that was 2:00 p.m. Now it's 2:30, right after my first fold. So that will help me keep track of when the 3.5 hours of bulk fermentation time is up. All right, I'm about to do my final series of folds. I'm on the 5th round. So after this, I am just gonna cover the bowl and let it rest for the remainder of the time that's called for the bulk ferment. That will be, for me, about 40 minutes. It has been 3 hours and 45 minutes since starting the bulk fermentation, and I would say the dough looks really nice. I think it's ready to be pre-shaped, which is the next step in this process. So it's very smooth. It does have some bubbles, like that's a bubble, I believe, on top. Very elastic and strong, so that's a good sign. And it also domes around the edge. So I'm gonna go ahead and dump this out on the counter. So to pre-shape, it says just divide the dough in half, and I'm gonna wet this hand so that it's easier to work with. I'm just gonna kind of shape it into a round a little bit, flip it, and just tuck it. Bench scraper, keeping this hand wet. And that looks pretty good to me, so I'll keep that. Use my bench scraper to flip it. Keep this hand wet and just go in at an angle with my bench scraper and just try to tuck in all the edges and using the counter as a little bit of resistance. So now that I have pre-shaped these loaves, I'm going to let them rest on the counter for 35 minutes, and then I'll come back and do the final shape where I put them into the Banneton basket. I'm gonna go ahead and prep my Banneton baskets. I like to use this to flour them lightly and make sure it's all even. Okay, it's now time to do the final shape. I'm a little bit nervous, but it's gonna be okay. He actually, in the book, has a little step-by-step guide on how to do this, so I'm going to follow that as closely as I can. So I believe the first thing I need to do is, whoa, this is really sticky, yikes. Okay. First thing I need to do is flour the surface. I'm going to flour this just lightly, and then flip my dough. Oh, it's so sticky. It's fine, it's fine. Flip my dough, and then it needs to be kind of rectangular in shape. Doesn't really look like the picture of him shaping a slack dough, but it's gonna be fine.
First step is to get your bench scraper and scoop your dough up and flip it. And that is done so that you can, and it gives you plenty of space on this rectangle to do so.
All right, take the bottom, fold it up to the middle. I'm gonna leave it there. Then one side at a time into the middle. So I'll do this side first. He says you can do both sides at the same time, but I'm not that ambitious. So that's what I'm gonna do. So now it's kind of like a log shape. Oh, darn.
Once you folded that down, one side at a time.
Okay, then I'm taking the top and folding it down towards kind of the middle of the dough. And then you take the whole package, is what he calls it, from the bottom and just flip it over kind of like that to a little log loaf thing, just like that.
Make sure your hands are floured. So we're kind of rounding a drag on the work surface.
Okay, now we're gonna tuck the dough under itself. So I believe you just kind of go like this and just tuck it under itself gently. And that looks really good to me. Now that my dough is shaped and nice and round, I'm just gonna use my bench scraper to flip it over into my Banneton. So, flipped into the Banneton. I guess I could have flipped it like that. I'm gonna attempt to do this next loaf just like I did the first. Flour my surface again a little bit, and then flip my pre-shaped dough over onto that. Have a nice oval shape dough, kind of rectangle, oval, whichever. I'm gonna make sure my hands are dusted a little bit. Take the bottom, flip it towards the middle. Take this side, flip it towards the middle. This side, flip it towards the middle. This, flip it towards the middle, and take the bottom and flip and roll the package over. Now I have this cute little package, and I'm just tucking the dough under itself and using the counter as resistance and making sure my hands are floured, because if not, this dough will stick. Take my bench scraper and flip it into my banneton. The next step is putting them into a bag, so it needs to be an airtight bag. I have these bread bags that I will put bread that's been baked into the bag, but I find that they're also really good at fitting baskets that I want to put in my fridge. So I'm just gonna put them in the fridge, and then I will see you guys tomorrow morning when they are ready to be baked, and I'm so excited. Can't wait. Good morning, it is bake day and I'm so excited. Before I get started for today, I need to preheat my oven to 450 and then put my Dutch oven inside while it's preheating, and that needs to sit in there for at least 30 minutes so everything can get nice and hot. My Dutch oven has been preheating, and now it is time to score the dough so that I can bake it. I do have one of these. I've never used it before. I'm kind of scared to. It doesn't look like super big to me, so I'm kind of scared the dough will just like fall off. Like it's not even, I don't know, I feel like it should be a little bit bigger than what the banneton basket is, and it's just not. I'm gonna still not use that and just do it the way he explains in the book. So here we go. He says put your parchment paper on top of the banneton basket like that, then take inverted cookie sheet and flip, and it's beautiful. It is very hot. Oh my gosh. Very hot, very smoky. Yikes. I don't know why it's like that. Maybe there was like stuff in there from cooking and it must have gotten a little bit burnt. Burnt on. My bad. Okay, I'm gonna take this and spray so some steam can release while it's baking, and then I'll go put it in the oven. It's in the oven. It needs to bake in there at 450 for 20 minutes with the lid on. So after the 20 minutes, I can take off the lid, and then it will need to bake for another 30 to 35 minutes, or until the internal temperature, according to him, reaches 206 to 210 degrees Fahrenheit. My 20-minute timer just went off, so it is now time to remove the lid. Okay, it's been 30 minutes, so I am going to take the temperature of the bread and see if it's done, and if it's done, I'll pull it. It does look a little bit flat, I'm not gonna lie, but I'm happy with it. I think it looks really nice. Definitely got a bit dark, but that's okay. I think it's pretty and it's cute. So cannot wait to cut into that. It has to cool for like 1 to 2 hours, which is the hardest part. Time for loaf number 2. I decided I actually am gonna use this thing because why not? I'm gonna experiment with it and see if I actually end up liking it better than using parchment, or if it's any easier. Okay, will it work? Oh my gosh. Okay. I think this is gonna be just fine. Not as scary as I thought. Oh, it's so smoky. Every time I open it, I don't know why. I'm gonna set it in there. Right. It's so beautiful, and I am so happy. They look almost identical, actually. They both look really nice to me, and I'm very happy with how they turned out. Okay, I decided it's time. I'm gonna cut into this one. First one we baked, because I literally cannot wait any longer. And it's been like an hour, 2 hours almost since baking it. It's just slightly to the top. It will be okay. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. It does seem a little bit like a tighter or denser crumb, or just denser than maybe I would prefer, and that could be for a lot of reasons. I'm not really sure. So I'm gonna have to research a little bit as to like, I don't know. I'm wondering if it is supposed to be this dense or if it's supposed to be a little bit lighter and airier and have more holes. Was it overproofed, underproofed? So if anybody has any comments or think they might know more about the structure and why it has a denser, tighter crumb than it does a more airy, light crumb, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. All that to be said, it's time to taste it. I think it's really good. I like it, and I like the whole wheat flavor. There's probably things that, you know, somebody who's a bread expert might look at this and say, oh, you could use this or you could use that, or it's not proofed enough or it's overproofed. But I think overall for my first loaf of the book in this series, the Perfect Loaf, I would say I'm very happy and very proud of it. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and like it. I will greatly appreciate that. And if you're interested in seeing more videos and content like this and following me along on my journey through this book, The Perfect Loaf, go ahead and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next video.